Hello and welcome to this quick guide on how to use the sky settings in Crayta. To start with, I need to be in create mode making a game to do this. And when I'm here, I need to be in advanced mode. So that's pressing tab when you're in basic mode to enter advanced mode. There's no scripting involved in editing the sky settings, but you do need to use advanced mode in order to make your way to the world settings tab, which is over here on the right hand side. You'll find all of the sky settings under within this menu. Things like the time of day and whether the game world has a day cycle. So does the sun move around and does it turn night at all? If you don't want your game to have a day cycle, then you can leave your day length as 0. If you do want it to have a day cycle, then put some numbers in here. This is hours, minutes, and seconds, and you can choose how long you want that day cycle to last. When it comes to lighting, using the sky settings in Crayta, there's 3 main sources of light, each of which are customizable. The first one is the sunlight, which comes from the sun. You can move which direction the sun is in by changing the sun direction. So here we can see that I'm moving the sun around in that way. And that could be really fun for making sure that the places that are lit, you want them to be lit and all that sort of thing. You can change the sun intensity and the sun color, which will change the intensity and the color of the light coming from the sun. It won't change the sun itself. Then we also have the moonlight, which is only active at night, but it's very similar to the sunlight here. It just is slightly to the right of the sunlight. If we look at turning it to night, you can kind of see the moon is over here and it moves round over the course of the night. So it's moving around like that. There we go. So we have moonlight at nighttime and sunlight in the daytime. We also have skylight, which is the general ambient light that exists in both the shadowy areas and in the lit areas. And there's 2 kind of skylight features. There's skylight day and there's skylight night. So we can change the intensity of daylight and the intensity of nightlight individually by using these sliders. And if I look at a shadowy area like this one over here and then increase the skylight, we can see that the ambient light is pervading more readily in our shadowy area there. And just to give you an idea about what that's all about. The atmosphere is really to do with the sky and the sky color. So at the moment, I have a standard atmosphere, and what it really is based on is it's kind of a model of what our atmosphere does on this planet. So it kind of behaves with light as our atmosphere behaves with light. And so our atmosphere blocks some wavelengths of light, lets others through, and so a standard atmosphere in Crayta will do the same thing. So it's a blue sky for now, but I can change the atmosphere scattering color if I wanted to. Let's make it a hot pink, and you'll see that the sky has changed to like a dark pink, but also the light that's coming through has changed. And you'll see the clouds have turned green, and that's because of the way that light would behave in an atmosphere as it tries to come through an atmosphere that was colored pink. This is what light would look like. And so this is quite a fun thing to play around with, and could be a bit tricky to get your head around initially with what's the difference between scattering and tint. So the main thing is that scattering is changing how the light is behaving as it's hitting the atmosphere, and the tint is changing the color of the light hitting the atmosphere. So here we now have everything's colored pink. Notice the clouds aren't green when we use the atmosphere tint. If you're making a game and you want it to be nighttime and starry, then you might need to use a different sort of thickness of your atmosphere. So a thin atmosphere will let the stars through, but it won't be that blue sky that we're used to. It won't be that standard atmosphere. And having no atmosphere lets the stars through with the highest contrast, but it also takes away our skylight. So now we have just the light coming from the sun. And notice how dark it can be in the shadowy areas without that skylight. So that's our atmosphere. If you want stars, then you need to use thin or none. If you use none, I would recommend that you light your game using lights as much as possible. Don't make it impossible for people to move around. Let's return that to standard. There's also fog, which is a super handy thing for trying to blend your game world with the background of that. It's fairly self-explanatory. The only thing that you might not have come across before is fall off, and that's just to do with the height of the fog there. Then we have clouds. You can change the thickness and the coverage and all of that kind of thing with the clouds. And then we're on to our horizon. So if I turn on editor rendering settings override, this will essentially take away all of that stuff to do with atmosphere and turn it back to what it was generically. But a big caveat is that when you publish it, the game will not have that checked. So this will be what your game looks like. It's super handy for building. You might want to check that to make sure what you're building to see it more clearly, or to place things more clearly. Anyway, I've turned that on so that we can see what the horizon checkboxes do. Essentially, they just change the background, the backdrop on the horizon and on the inner horizon. So I can add a jungle and I can add some mountains behind the jungle. And so on. So you can add a bit of background. And then finally, we're on the post-processing, and that really is to do with changing the kind of filter on the color grading. I need to have that off. So I could make it warm, or I could make it cool, or anything in between. And then we also have the post-processing, which is some fun, cool shading effects that you can add to your game. Things like sketch, which makes it look like a drawing, or cell shaded, which makes it look like a cartoon. So there you go. There's a few things that you can do to customize your sky and your rendering settings for your game. Make it feel more like accentuating the mood that you want your game to have. You can make it feel more tense, more explorative, more dramatic, however you want to approach it. I would really encourage you to experiment and to play around with these settings at the start of making your game and see where you might want your sun to come from. And let's just play with it and see what you want your game to feel like. And I look forward to playing your games in Crayta.